Okay, good evening. Hello, hello. I'd like to welcome everybody to the 1916 Committee Lecture Series. First, I have to welcome you to the hall that we're in. There are some unfamiliar faces here. Just so that you know, this is the Irish Ceilidh Club of Rhode Island. It's been here since 1956. It's a very important venue that we have here, and it is certainly keeping Irish culture alive on this side of the bay, and without it, I don't know exactly where we'd be. There is a dedicated group of volunteers who are on the board of the Ceilidh Club, working constantly improving this place. You know that by the kitchen that's going downstairs. There's now a handicapped bathroom in the back of the room. And if you notice, the floor, we were going to have this at 5 o'clock, but we were afraid somebody would be blinded by the sun coming out. So we go to 7:30. But there are signs on the wall, and I ask everyone to respect this, because this was a job and a half. There's a small group of us that will put the chairs away at the end of the night, you know, and we're asking people, don't slide them to the wall, we'll pick them up, and we'll do it ourselves. It only takes a few minutes with a couple of people. So I just want to welcome you here. We're always looking for new members here at the Ceilidh Club. There's membership forms on the stairs on the way down. You can talk to many people here, be happy to take your money. You can get the schedule, you'll get a newsletter, you'll know there's events going on here every Friday night, and sometimes at other times as well. The group that's sponsoring this event is called the 1916 Committee. We came together in 2014 when a number of Irish organizations joined together to form a committee in the run-up to the 100th anniversary of the 1916 Easter Rising. And at that time, we did multiple lectures, multiple events to try to educate people about the history of the Easter Rising of 1916. And I guess the highlight of our activities was the building of a monument down at the Rhode Island Irish Famine Memorial Monument. And that was quite an accomplishment. People from all over the state contributed to it, and we're proud that it exists down there at the Greenway, the Rhode Island Providence Greenway. And if you haven't been down there, I try to stop down there once a week or so, and it's a nice place to just sit and reflect, looking at the river, looking at the monument and all that means. Once we built that monument, we thought our work was done, and we were just going to disband. But then Kathy Greenwell said, you know, why don't we just keep on going? And here we are, that many years later. We still have monthly lectures. One highlight that happened with our committee was back in 2021, we had a event over at the Galway Bay, rest in peace, the late great Galway Bay, and it was for the 40th anniversary of the 1981 hunger strike. It was so well attended and so enthusiastically supported that we decided we would again try a campaign to raise funds to build another monument for the 1981 hunger strikers. That again was very successful. It was contributed to by many small donations that added up to us being able to put in that monument. Over on the side there, you can see a handmade banner quilt made by a woman in Chicago that identifies the 10 hunger strikers. And the Ceilidh Club itself was so impressed with that they ran raffles, raised more than $3,000. It was an auction to see which organization might want to buy it. The Ceilidh Club far outraised other people's money, and that's a permanent fixture here. If you want to look at it later, there are 3 autographs on it. One is from Pat Sheehan, who spoke at the dedication to the monument. Pat Sheehan was on hunger strike for 63 days before the hunger strike was called off. He signed it next to Karen Doherty. He took Karen Doherty's place after Karen died. It's also signed by Malachi McCreesh, who is Ray McCreesh's brother, who was one of the early hunger strikers to die. Malachi was here in Rhode Island in July of 1981 as an 18-year-old boy. He was bringing support for his brother, Malachi. It's also signed by Sean Sands, the first hunger striker's brother, Bobby Sands. Sean was also here in Rhode Island in 1981, in the summer of 1981. He spoke at the Blarney Stone Pub. He signed it. Some of us were very lucky in the last week to see Sean here performing and singing with Finbar Doyle up at the Tap in Cumberland. He played down at the O'Reilly Center in Springfield and up at the Irish Cultural Center in Canton. Sean was he was the most important person in us being able to raise the money for the Hunger Strike Monument. He did several concerts for us, and they were always very lucrative. All he ever wanted was to see his brother's name in stone down there at the Greenway, and he visits it every time he comes back to Rhode Island. The 1916 committee has monthly lectures. We try to educate people about Irish history, Irish culture, Irish American history, and Irish American culture. We've had many events here and in other places. The last event we had was on September 15th, where we had a fundraising Irish breakfast at Patrick's Pub. We did this in conjunction with Division 12 Ladies Ancient Order of Hibernians, the local Providence chapter. And it was a very successful day. We raised a good amount of money, both through ticket sales, a raffle, donations, and the profit was $1,665, which is going, or has already been delivered, I just heard, to the National Freedom for All Ireland Committee of the Ladies Order of Hibernians. That money is then distributed to organizations in the 6 counties of Ireland, separated by petition. All the organizations that get money are committed to seeing peace in Ireland and the reunification of Ireland. So if there are people who feel sympathetic to those goals, please talk to some of the women here who are in the Ladies AOH, and they'll be happy to get information. You can join, you can participate in these fundraising events, and you can get actively involved in the political and educational work that they do. Next month, November 1st, just a brief announcement here that we're going to have another lecture. That's the first Friday in November. Tim Hoyt, who has spoken here several times, who is a professor at the Newport Navy War College. He is a counter-terrorism expert, and he has delivered several very fascinating lectures. This time he is going to speak on the topic of democracy and militarism in Ireland, 1912 to 1938. Right now he is in Portugal this weekend giving a lecture there on that topic, so he's practicing for when he can come to the but he made the point that it's 4 or 5 days before the election here. He's going to be talking about democracy and militarism, so I think they'll all get an earful with that. So I'd like to, again, welcome everybody. You're in for a very special treat tonight. We're very happy to have Ray McKenna here. He needs no introduction. He's going to mesmerize you. I do want to say this. Could I just ask a question? Everyone here is on the 1916 newsletter email, right? And that's how you heard about this? Could all the people who printed out the attachment hold it up? So, oh, we got one back there. We got, hey! Hey, right. We have printed out some Ray Fields' best. At the end of the night, if you want to take this, it's a step-by-step guide as to what Ray's going to tell us. Without further ado, here is Ray McKenna.
I'm going to ask one little thing of you guys. if you would be so kind, would you all move up a little further? The visual, and there are 4 seats up here. I'd love to see some people sit up front.
All right, let's pick the chairs up. Should we move the? Oh, they didn't come up yet. You'll get it. You'll get it.
On Tuesday. Can you make this comfortable on that?
Here we go. Send somebody in the front row here.
You don't bite, do you?
Mike?
You don't bite.
I don't bite.
Hey.
That's great. Thank you very much.
No, I'm holding it. No, that's mine. I'm just holding it. I can tell it's Anne's. How do you know? If you're doing the drinks.
So, just like Jim likes to advertise before he does things. Oh, first up, we got a question for you. Who has ancestors that were here in Rhode Island between 1844 and 1897? What about people that don't know if they have ancestors here between 1844 and 1897? Okay. If you had ancestors, it doesn't matter what their ethnicity is. There's a very good chance this material's going to have your ancestors. And I'll give you plenty of examples. But the first thing I need to do is I have some advertising. I think this from Jim. Thank you so much. Great, thank you so much. So March 12th, 2025. You guys know about Roscommon Souls. We are, I've been invited to join them. We're going to be telling the story with music and dance of a teenage girl during the famine, Katie Dugan. She came with her father and older brother to Providence, and she took a job working in a wealthy family as a domestic, and she took that money and sent for her, this is a true story, sent for her mother and her little younger siblings to come over. And when they all got together, they lived on Federal Hill. And she married my great-great-grandfather, Peter McKenna, and they had a family. So the story is the story of Katie from when she's a teenage girl at 13 to raising children and then being an elderly widow, and her life and the whole community on the hill. And it's going to be song and dance, and it's going to be fabulous. So save that date. And I have one more advertisement. And I can't give you a date on this, but hopefully early next year, this book is going to come out, and it tells the story of, it tells lots of stories of the little people, all actual people. Sometimes they were unwed mothers, sometimes they were little kids whose parents died at sea, what happened to them in Providence. Sometimes it was working class people that went through hell, and a few people that persevered. And the message is going to be, the message in this is like the message in our presentation for Roscommon Souls, and that is, life was not easy, but it was grand. So that's going to be coming up. So these are some of my 19th century ancestors. My cousin Martha's here, so you may recognize our aunt and our great-grandmother. And I think the rest of them on the other side of the family. But anyway, let's talk about getting some okay, so this bank, this building, we all know this. Some of us have bad memories from was it the 80s or the 90s when it went under? But it did great things for our ancestors. The bank opened in 1818, second bank in the United States where a working class person could come down and put a nickel in and have a bank account. All the other banks, and there were lots of banks then, all the other banks wanted $100, $1,000. They were looking for investors. We want to build a canal, we want to build a railroad. So that's why we're bringing money in. This bank was a place where the little people could go and deposit money. So, the records, this is the original building. You know, they built it, that's why they built banks in the old days, to look like no one can get into this. And that's how it took out its nickname, the Old Stone Bank. These are the things you can find in these records. These records were given to the Rhode Island Historical Society when the bank closed, and until a fellow, he was an old fellow, about my age, except this was 20 years ago, named Ed Dugan, started digging into the records and started finding his ancestors. And I was in the library one day, and I said, I'm looking for my McKenna ancestors, I'm looking for my Dugan ancestors. He said, oh, you got to meet Ed Dugan. And so I met Ed Dugan. And so for years, he and I would open up books and go through and try to, thousands and tens of thousands of pages. I finally was successful in getting better access, and finally, a few years ago, I brought the Rhode Island Historical Society together, the New England Historical and Genealogical Society in Boston, and they transcribed it. And what they did, and Rick Ring at Rhode Island Historical Society was very adamant. You're going to have this on your website, but you can't have a paywall. So when you go to the website, you don't have to be a member of the Genealogical Society to use it. I would not mind. Are you having a hard time in the back there, maybe?
Yeah.
Oh, let's get a microphone going. Yeah.
Just have to turn it on.
Let's turn it on. It's on. It's on. It's on. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me any better? Let's see what's going on. Here we go. Okay. So the records came out, and this is what I'm going to talk to you about today. This is the kind of stuff that you find in these records. Now, they cover about half a century, and there are over 500,000 records. Over 800,000 names. And these are the things. You get the address, you get the age, you get occupation, and that's what happens in the early years. Jim, you just have to follow me around the room here. And then later on, you start to get the birthplace. Right from the beginning, you find out if they're literate or not, because there's an X after their name. If they had, it was a legal document, they had to sign it, and if they didn't know their name, the bank official would write in the name, and then you'd put an X. And the level of literacy among early Irish people is very, very high. And then later years, you get maiden names, you get parents' names. This for a genealogy thing, it is amazing. For a point of view of a historian, it's extraordinary. And you can see the countries. Now, all the material is up online, but I have a little crew. If anyone wants to join that crew, they can. I've got 2 other people and myself that are transcribing and also digging into what we're reading. And up through 1876, about 80% of the people who opened bank accounts were Irish. Irish from Ireland, not Irish American. If you start adding Irish American, it's probably closer to 90%. But you also have people from England, Scotland, Cape Verde Islands, the Azores, from a few people from France. Found a person the other day that came right after the Germans conquered France or conquered Alsace in 1871. The end of the Franco-Prussian War. And this guy came to Providence, opened up a bank account, and said, I am from Strasbourg, in Alsace, in France, not in Germany, which it was at the time. So the material here is quite extraordinary. And you can also see, you get people from Australia, Brazil, Turkey, and one guy who signed in was from Africa. So this is what you do, and I have these sheets for you if you want afterwards. I can give them to you. You're going to Google NEHGS, Old Stone Bank, and what's going to pop up is American Ancestors Database. You're going to have to register, no cost. And then way down at the bottom, and I wrote this in because it's hard to see, but it's in blue. You probably see this sometimes when there's a place where you're supposed to hit and you can hardly tell that it's there. You tap on Providence, Rhode Island, Old Stone Bank records, and the next thing you're going to see is, thank you, you're going to see a sheet like this. So in this case, Edward Fanning was a great-great-grandfather of mine. I don't think he ever lived in Rhode Island. I found out about 40 years ago that he got married to a woman named Honora Mullen up in Sutton, Mass, up not too far from here. And I found records of him in Webster, Mass, and in Worcester, and then they moved out to the Berkshires near Pittsfield, and then he died up in Seneca Falls. I found all this stuff along the way, but I couldn't find out anything about where he came from. I wanted to know something about this guy. He got naturalized. He and 14 other Irishmen went down one day and all became naturalized citizens. 14 of the 15 people wrote on the document where in Ireland they were born. Guess who the 15th was? I mean, I'm serious. This is like really upsetting. So seriously, I type his name in, and then just for kicks, I put Honora Mullen down just to see if it'll show up. Oh, here we go. And lo and behold, there's several Edward Mullins, or Edward Fannings, and here's Honora Mullen Fanning over here. That means they have a record. There might be something there. Now, when you find something like this, you also want to look at all the other Edward Fannings. As it turns out, you find out pretty quickly if they come from the same place. There are ways to tell age and things like that if they're the right people. And so there were quite a few Edward Fannings. In fact, I checked out all the Fannings to see if I could find siblings. I think I found his parents, but I'm not sure. So then I hit on Edward Fanning, and look what comes up. Oh, it's a little hard to see. Oh, can we kill some of the lights in the back? Is that possible? Or all the lights if you want. Okay, it's a little hard to see at the top here, but here's Edward Fanning, and it says that he lives in Mohegan, Rhode Island, which is part of Oroville. Thank you. And he was born in Roscommon. And then I see that Honora was born in Galway. So I do a little investigation, and on the left-hand side, you can see the Mullen households in Galway, which is adjacent to Roscommon. And on the right-hand side, you can see the Fanning households in Roscommon. And while there are many Mullins, fewer Fannings, but there are a few groups of them that are very close together near the borders of Galway and Roscommon. So I haven't dug far enough into this, but I think there's a reasonable chance I could get very close to the farmhouses that they grew up in. Because I've done it, you're going to see I've done it with others. Let's go on to the next one. So this next one, Mary Holden is the woman on the right, and she married a fellow named Barney McLaughlin. Those are her two of her daughters. The tall woman on the left is my great-grandmother, my dad's grandmother, Sarah McLaughlin. And so I didn't know anything about Mary Holden, but she came in August 1850 and signed in as Mary Hogan. And then 3 months later, she gets married. So we get down to December 22nd, 1866. She's opening a new account, and very often so if you find an account, you might find the same person opening more accounts, because maybe they consolidated money with their spouse, or maybe they went through a bad time and they had to take all their money out of the bank. It's really hard to tell. But she opens a new account and she puts in Mary McLaughlin, born in County Mayo. I never knew this. Born in County Mayo. And you'll notice also she's illiterate, so she's got the X there. They're living in Oneyville. She's the wife of Barney, who is an operative in Tappan Wigan Mill. So now I even know a little bit about Barney because I know where he's working. Well, they didn't stay together for very long. He was a violent man, and so they separated. And about the time they separated, Barney opened up his own account. He said he was 35. Well, they say he said he was 35. They always thought he was like 10, 15 years younger than he was because he was a really boyish looking guy. It says he's born in Derry. Voila. And he's in Oneyville. He didn't move far away from his ex-wife. And he's a laborer now at Riverside Mills. Incidentally, I also found, I didn't put this on here, but I found out later on that his mother's maiden name was McGee, and she was from Derry. And I've gone to the records of the mid-1850s, and I've identified a very small little part of land where the McLaughlins and the McGees overlap. And I'm pretty sure that with a little bit of time, I can actually go back and walk on the farm. I'm an optimist. And then in 1895, shortly before she died, actually, and that's another story, she was murdered, but that'll be in my book. I got some stuff like that in my book. Anyway, there she is. She's living in Johnston. She's got, again, she says she's from Mayo, and she puts down that her father was Martin Hoban, and her mother was Bridget Gibbons. Wow! I mean, if you've tried to trace your family, this is really important stuff. This is all coming out in just my one little family, and we were pretty poor people. This is not fancy stuff. So all of this material is coming out, and it's helped me write a very big. I have a whole chapter on her life in my book, but it's helped me to put a whole story together about this woman, and it starts right here in the Old Stone Banks. Let's go on to the next one. Now, those of you who know me have heard me talk that I went back to County Monaghan with my dad. He was 88 at the time. I was, I don't know, in my 50s, and my son was in his 20s. And the three of us, the three McKenna lads, went back to County Monaghan, and we sought to find our McKenna ancestors. And so we checked into a place in Claslov, not far from Emmyvale. And because my son and I are bicyclists, I ordered a couple of bicycles to be delivered, and we get there, and the delivery guy comes, and this guy is Paddy McQuaid, who's become a dear friend. He opens up his thing and gives me his trunk, and he gets his bikes out. And I said, you know, Paddy, we're here to find our McKenna ancestors. And he goes, oh yeah. Half of the people in that area are either McKennas or they're married to McKennas. Separating them out. In Providence, in 1870, there were, I think it was 29 heads of household on Federal Hill alone, leaving out the rest of the city or going out into the villages outside. They were named McKenna. So I can't do that. But then I said, well, you know, I'm also looking for my Dugan ancestors. And he goes, oh my God, my wife is a Dugan McKenna. And it actually turns out that she and I are cousins. So, but my McKennas are still a mystery, right? So I've never been able to figure out when Peter died young at 43, on his death certificate it says his father was Barney and his mother was Bridget. But there's no last name for Bridget. Well, I haven't proved this, but I came across, and there are a lot of reasons why I suspect that this is a thing, and I won't get into all the details, but here we have these two people whose parents were Bernard McKenna and Bridget Hackett. Now, Hackett is quite a common name in County Roscommon and less common in Monaghan. So I took a look to see where the Hacketts were living in Monaghan in the 50s. And lo and behold, they're living very close to where my Dugan ancestors come from. I always suspected that Peter knew Catherine Dugan before they got married, and he knew her there. So I could be on my way to finding a whole new branch of family. Now, once you go through the old Stone Bank records and you found what you can find, you can go to Federal Hill Irish, which is my website. And if you go down, would you do the next one, please? And you go down on the cover page, the cover screen, and you come to the old Stone Bank records. You're going to hit search records, and you're going to have something that looks like this. Now, because we're finding, even though we haven't gotten past we're still in the 1870s. We're going very fast, but it's 500,000 records. Takes a while. So if you're looking for somebody, there are a couple of ways you can do this. Now, down here are the years, so you can see like this is 1875. So you can hit on the year. If you find something on the old Stone Bank on the first website, and you want to check it against mine, you've got a year, you've got a date. If you're not sure, what you can do, you can go in, copy the screen, copy the spreadsheet. Incidentally, there are things over here like little finger on left hand is out of joint. There are a lot of little bits of information, lots of information that shows up. Not for everybody, but it's there. And there are places where we make corrections. There was one in there that when they did the transcriptions in Boston, they don't know the Rhode Island names, surnames as well. My guys are expert at this. So Raycraft, which is a very rare name, incidentally, they put down as Rycraft. So if you're looking for Raycraft and you go to the other website, ain't gonna find it. But you'll find. But so we make the corrections here. Would you hit hit the next one? So once you copy it and make a separate spreadsheet, you can then put all the things together. Like if you want to know where they came from, you get all the Leitrim people, all the Monaghan people. If you wanted to find out all the people that worked at this is the same mill where Barney McLaughlin worked at, you could find that out in this row. If you want to know all the people whose names are McLaughlin or Harrington or Williams, you can do the same thing. You can group them all together. Can you go to the next one, please? Now, this is what we've found so far, and we got a long way to go, but we've got 18,000 people from 32 counties telling us where they come from. That's a lot of people. That's why I think the chances of you're finding an ancestor in this is really good. You can see how many ancestors I've found. So they're there to be found. Roscommon comes in the strongest, which even though I like to say that I'm a Monaghan boy, it turns out that this has taught me that I'm 1/4 Roscommon. 4 of my 16 great-great-grandparents come from Roscommon. A lot of Roscommon people came here. There's a whole chapter, 1 chapter or 2 on their migration. Tyrone is right behind. You see Leitrim, Cork. And what you also find out when you look at this, and what I'm finding out as I look at this, is the chain migrations change. In the early years, it's heavily Tyrone and Monaghan in the 1850s. And then you get into the 1860s, you start seeing Leitrim and Roscommon show up. You get into the 1870s, you start seeing Carlow, Clare, Tipperary, Cork. So it's coming in waves. It's not just like the Irish came. And to me, it's very helpful to understand the lives these people lived. Let's go on to the next one. 2,200 women have filled out the form that we've recorded. There are many more of them to come. Listing where they were born. 2,200 Irish women who worked in the houses of the well-to-do, right down where they were born. And incidentally, a lot of these records, a lot of the people that show up in the bank accounts never show up in the city directories. They never show up in the census records. They don't show up in any other record. Because when we find somebody, we then investigate and see where else we can find them. And a lot of the people, it was such a quick turnover. There were so many people that were poor and kept moving on to other places or died young. So the records are just extraordinary. Next one, please. Here's another thing, and this is scandalous, but it wasn't. These are people as young as 10 years old opening up bank accounts. They're opening up bank accounts because they're working 60 hours a week in factories. You see, and you know what it did to kids. Look at these two lads on the left there. Now they're probably just fun-loving kids, but they also could possibly cut your throat. They're totally uneducated. So, and they're going to be very emotional because they don't know how to express themselves. They've gone to work at the age of, Joseph Bannigan went to work in a factory at the age of 9. They go to it, and my great-great-grandfather, my great-grandfather went to work at the age of 9 in a factory. So they're raw, they're hard. The young woman on the left, now she's not in Rhode Island, she's in southern Vermont, but I just love that. She's both beautiful and she's vulnerable, and she just typifies these little kids. She was 10 years old. She's barefoot. Her clothes are dirty and crummy and falling apart, and she wears the same clothes every day to work, and she works 10 to 12 hours a day, 5 days a week. They generally gave the kids Saturday off. And so these kids are opening up, and no one's like calling the police on it or anything. You have Ellen McKenna, who's same as my name. She's 14 years old. She's working in a mill. James Patton, he's 11. He's a mill worker. James Robinson, 10-year-old Irish lad from the north of Ireland. Horrifying stuff that's going on, and it comes out in these records. Next one, please. Now this is amazing to me. I have found so far 176 names that when you combine them with the counties they come from are so rare that in many cases you can go right back to the farm. Now, I've walked on the farmland of 2 of my ancestors. I didn't find it through here, but I know enough about how hard it is to actually find that farmland, and yet these records are sending us there. Now, some of the names you'll see in there you may not think are that rare, like maybe McIntyre, for example. But if McIntyre is combined with a certain county, all of a sudden it can become a very rare thing. Like the Dugans in my family are rare in County Monaghan. They're plentiful in County Clare. So that's what I'm talking about right there. 176 so far. When I put this together for this talk about 2 weeks ago, I had 163. I've found 13 just in the last week or so. We should go to the next one. So a woman wrote to me recently. She said she was heading off to County Tyrone, and this is what we're talking about. This is County Monaghan, and this is County Tyrone, and it's all right here on the border. Auchnacoy, incidentally, that's where Bobby Sands, he represented Auchnacoy in Parliament. So right in the guts of Northern Ireland. However, Monaghan is part of the Republic, even though it's Ulster, and Tyrone obviously is in Northern Ireland. So she said she's going over to explore her Holland family. Well, I know something about her Holland family because I've been doing this stuff for a while. There's Cormac. Cormac was a seneschal. He was a storyteller. He would go around from house to house and sit down and have tea with people and just talk away, and they loved him. His brother got in trouble because his brother had a very good position on the estate of one of the big landowners. And his job was to go around with a rifle, and if anybody was going to try to steal kill a deer or steal a pig or anything off that land, he had the right to kill him. Well, Cormac's brother made the mistake of shooting a deer to bring home because they were hungry. His family was starving. So he shot the deer, and as a result, he had to run for his life. And where did he run? He ran to Providence. So I wrote back to this person. I think she already had the picture too. It can be found. I've got 22 records of Holland people from County Tyrone in the Old Stone Bank. She is as likely to find more material in the Old Stone Bank record than she's going to spend in the week or two that she's visiting Tyrone. Now, I don't take Tyrone away because it's very important to travel. You go to a place, you learn stuff you don't even know what you're learning. It fills your life up. But as far as facts go about the family, you might find more right here. The next one, please. This next one is remarkable. One morning, Thomas Hamill and his dad, Owen Hamill, went into the bank. Thomas was a marble polisher for Tingley Stone Works. Tingley, you'll find Tingley stones all through St. Patrick's Cemetery up on Douglas Avenue. You'll find them in St. Francis as well. The Irish like to buy their stones. They bought them from other people, but they like to buy their stones from Tingley. And Tingley, in turn, hired Irish workers. And one of the Tingley boys also married an Irish girl. So that was the Tingleys were Yankees. But anyway, so they go in, and here he opens up the thing, and he puts down he's from County Tyrone. Big deal. The dad says, I'm from Dromedara. Oh, County Tyrone. Holy smokes. That's pretty specific. So I start digging back in the records of the 19th century. They're thin. They're not a lot of stuff. But I find in this map from the 1850s, if you can see that green arrow, the number 8, that's his farm. That's the farm that this guy was farming. No questions asked. So I have a friend named Donald Muldoon. He lives not too far away from there. So I said, Donald, if you're over in that area, he loves to take photographs. Can you see if you can find the farmhouse? That's the farmhouse. So Donald goes to the farmhouse. It's empty. He checks it out. He goes inside. He measures it. He says, the dimensions are right to be pre-famine. I really think this, because those guys, they pay a lot of attention to that stuff. I really believe that this is the house he lived in. And then he gives me a little bit of the history that the last people that lived there were 2 men, 2 old guys living there that seemed to die about 10 years ago, and it's been abandoned. But the house is still there, and Donald has a drone. So do the next one. Go back one. This is his farm. This is the farm that the guy writes down in the record. Isn't that amazing? Only because of the Old Stone Bank. Now, if a descendant of these 2 people, the father and son, see this record, they can go back and walk. They can walk inside the abandoned house of their ancestor. This is the Old Stone Bank. Can we do the next one, please? And there are people who become famous. Now, there are rich people that also opened up accounts there. It wasn't just and there are stories like this in my book. You can learn about how Jeremiah Baggett's wife, Mary, went down to the Old Stone Bank. Their son, John, was an officer in the American Army, and they were optimistic that he would survive, so they opened up an account so when he came back, he'd have a way to start to recover, get used to life again, and he'd be able to build his wealth. There's another woman that lived on Acorn Street up on Federal Hill. You know where Tony's Colonial is. Acorn used to go down the hill, and she lived there, and her son went off to war, and I can't think of her name right at the moment, but she opened up an account for him, and about the same week, she bought a piece of land on Atwell's Avenue, so that when he came back from the war, they could build a house, and then she could live there and take care of her grandkids. And unbeknownst to her, within a week or two, her son was killed. She died a widow. She gave her money to St. John's Church, to McCabe, the priest there, who may have saved some lives, but he was not always a good man. Anyway, all those stories come out of this. Can you do the next one, please? And for blacks, it both galls one, but also it helps a researcher. When a black person came in to open a bank account, they would put a C for colored after their name. So, yeah, they were being separated already, but at the same time, it's very good for researchers, because if you want to check out the black population, the New England Historical and Genealogical Society does not have that material, but our thing, you can find out all the black people in every year that opened accounts, if they were identified that way. One woman, because they also wanted to describe people so when they came back, they could know who the person was. And one woman came in and they speculated that she was a quadroon, is that the right word? A person who was a quarter black. So I mean, they were like, anyway, so the 14th Rhode Island Heavy Artillery, colored, was the first all-black unit in the North to be put together for warfare in the Civil War. In the American Revolution, there was only one full black unit, and that came out of Newport, and that's in all of the 13 colonies. So this group, it wasn't like it was an honor for them, because they sent them down to the swampland outside of New Orleans, where they didn't really give them a chance to do much fighting, but did give them a chance to get malaria and all those kind of things. But anyway, and they also said to these people, this is what we're going to pay you. Oh, it's less than white people get. Well, it's better than what I have, so I'm going to take it. And then the US government started saying, I guess maybe it was the Rhode Island government, started saying, well, we can't really afford to pay you. So they had to squabble. And if you want to know what kind of money they made and when they got it, over a period of 1 week, the wives started to come in to make the deposits. Now, I haven't gone to see the dollars and cents. That's more digging, but I have discovered that they were often living close together. When the war came to an end, these guys that had served together, a lot of them lived sometimes in the same apartment buildings, often down in Oneyville. Yeah, so there's so much material for all kinds of ethnic groups to find. This fellow. This is Aaron Ginsberg. Aaron Ginsberg opened up an account, and that's how he signed his name. Now, I've got a friend who's a former student. Before I got into, well, I spent a career in the wine business, but I did teach history for 11 years. And one of the things I did was teach kids how to do genealogical work. And we talked a lot about immigration and various migrations. So I contacted Mitch, who lives down in Washington, D.C. now. And he wrote back and said, I can't make heads or tails out of the name. I don't know what he was writing, but it wasn't Yiddish. And but anyway, that's how he signed his name. Well, what's interesting is he says he's a native of Russia from the town of Kovno. So I start looking, what, Kovno? Well, I look up Kovno, and that's an old name for the town, but it was a small city. Well, let's see, it was a city of 120,000. That's not a small town. It's a city in Lithuania. So now, if anybody's the descendant of Aaron, and it's very hard. The hardest people to trace are African Americans, for trace their ancestry, for obvious reasons. Irish, because the records are very poor and English wouldn't, well, it really it's hard. And Jews out of Eastern Europe in particular. Records get destroyed. Names change, places. He thought he lived in Russia because Russia owned Lithuania at the time, but it was Lithuania. Now, in World War II, when Kovno was occupied, first by the Russians and then by the Nazis, the city population of the Jews was something like 32,000 people. When the war came to an end, they found in the forests outside of the city, they found 500 Jews hiding out. And they located another 2,500 who were in prisoner of war camps. They're in ghettos, in concentration camps, thanks. So out of a population of 32,000, 3,000 survived. But this is coming out of the old stone bag. This is, you start with like 2 words, his name or 3 words, his name and the place, and stories come out. Let's do another one. My book is called Federal Hill Irish for a reason. It's because that's 4 generations lived on the hill, and the 5th moved next door to Mount Pleasant. So Federal Hill is one of my ancestral homes. So in looking at the Irish on Federal Hill, I can't avoid the Italians. Obviously, eventually because of the Italy. Well, perhaps these are among the first Italians to move onto the hill, the Rodino brothers. There are 5 of them: Giuseppe, Giorgio, Luigi, Roberto, and Tommaso. So they lived on 18 Teff Street. They lived 2 doors from my house. Well, not my house, but my family's house. So these are pictures of Garibaldi. They came at the time when Italy was trying to reunite. That may have been part of why they came. But then you look at their records, the first one, Luigi opens up his account and says he's a fresco painter. Now, what the heck is a fresco painter doing in Providence? Hey, the Irish Catholic population is soaring. They're building churches like crazy. And I know there's this guy named James Murphy, and he had a business in New York City, and he had so many contracts to build houses in Rhode Island and Connecticut and in eastern Massachusetts that he opened up an office in Providence. He opens the office about the same time that the Rodino brothers show up. So of course, he needs fresco painters. Now let's look at the next line. This is, go back, please. That's okay. Roberto opens up, and he's a fresco painter, and he said he was born in Tuscany. Now, if you're gonna get a fresco painter, what better place than Tuscany? It's the home of Giotto. It's the home of the Renaissance. So now the next line, Joseph opens up, and he says he's in Lucca. Now, Lucca is a city in the north of Tuscany. Wow, now I'm starting to get close to something. But then their mother, they come over, and then when they can afford it, they bring over their mother, and then they also bring over women who are going to be wives. I don't know how you'd say it, girlfriends. Anyway, they bring over their future wives, and she's with her son Tonino, and what does she say? He's a painter, of course, a fresco painter. They were born in Barga, Tuscany, B-A-R-G-A. This is very specific. So if you're one of these people that are obsessed with this kind of thing, like me, and you want to know what's going on, what do? You go to Barga. So I went to Barga 2 years ago. Well, would you do the next, please? Now, here's Tuscany. France is over here. Croatia's over here. There's Lucca. It's on its way up. If you've been to the Cinque Terre, it's very close to the Cinque Terre, and it's on its way to Genoa. And just above, and Lucca's in the hills, it's a walled city, and just above it, up in the hills, is the small town of Barga. Voila, there I am. Well, I'm not there. But here is in September of 2022, just about 2 years ago. And what I wanted to do instantly, I know it seems like I'm nuts. My wife and I like to travel anyway, and we had planned to go to Italy, and I suggested that we go to, actually I think Gail suggested we go to Lucca, and I said, well, that's great, because then we can go up to Barga. So the two of us go up to Barga. I want to see what these young men, when they were learning to be fresco painters, that's a profession, that's not just something you take on. What was their influence? Who did they study from? What did they see? Now, Barga is only about 5 miles north of Lucca. And Lucca is a walled city that guards the north up toward Milano from Tuscany, so that like the Sforzas living in Milano and the Medici living in Tuscany keeps them separated. So and Barga, even though it's right next to Lucca, was associated, it was always part of the Medici controlled area where Florence is the capital. So these boys got to study Giotto in person, got to see Raphael's work in person, got to see Michelangelo in person. So I want to know, because I'm married to an artist, and I've loved this art of the Middle Ages, late medieval and early Renaissance art. I've loved this stuff forever. And so I had to go to we both had to go to Barga to find out. Would you do the next one? Here, I wish it was a little darker, but it's not. I guess you guys can see maybe better than I can. Here are some of the works I saw. Beautiful works of the Middle Ages. These are all maybe late Middle Ages, but certainly not Renaissance yet. But the colors, the flow of the drapes, of the drapery, their robes, really, really moving. And let's do the next one. And this is one. This is a Renaissance piece. You can see the movement. You can see the humanism coming into play. And these are the kind of works, these boys saw this stuff. And then they come to Providence to work for Murphy. Can we do the next one, please? This is St. Mary's on Broadway. So I went inside. It's kind of hard to get the very good pictures. These are paintings and mosaics, but they painted. This could have been done. This church opened in 1869. Murphy was active as a architect then, and they were active, and they only lived a few blocks away from here. So the chances of some of the Rodino boys doing this work is very, very possible. We should do the next one, please. This is a fresco, and it's way up high in St. Mary's, and it's very possibly the work of one of the Rodino brothers. Now, all of this was possible because of the old Stone Bank records. This is what I found. And then, of course, you find things, but it builds. But if you don't find that word Barga, it ain't happening. Let's do the next one. Oh, go back one. Now this is what it comes to. Now it's your turn. Where will the old Stone Bank take you? These are the kind of records that we transcribe. They can be really hard to read, but we do the transcriptions for you. And instantly, don't just look at the transcription. You want to look at the record too, because we make mistakes. The people in Boston make more mistakes. Only because they were doing it very fast. They did it over a couple of months. They have a bigger team, but they did it over a couple of months, and they don't know the names well. I came across somebody named McElroy. McElroy was a very common name on Federal Hill. How many of you know somebody named McElroy? Yeah. So they didn't, whoever came across it had no clue that McElroy would be a Providence name. And so they write down something that if you go looking for it, their stuff, you're not going to find it. You have to come to ours. But here we are. We have painters, carriage trimmers. You can find out who your ancestors what kind of work they did, who they worked for. Here's a guy who was a farmer. All of these people are not Irish, but you get the picture of what's going on. And let's do one last slide. So I want to leave you with a picture of my neighborhood. This is Spruce Street in the 1890s. By this time it was called Little Italy, but my family still lived there for another 30 years, and it was still an Irish enclave, still heavily descendants of Ulster, with plenty of people from Leitrim and Roscommon and all those other places. And 19th century photographs of poorer neighborhoods are really rare, so this is quite an extraordinary painting, photograph. But this is Spruce Street, so if you go up Atwells Avenue, Spruce Street's the parallel street to the right. And it used to be the center of the neighborhood until they took out, until they built Route 6 and 10 and took out half the place. But anyway, that's the story of the Old Stone Bank. And if you think you have ancestors, or you have friends who have ancestors, this stuff is in there, and it's rich. Thank you very much. And now, can I answer anybody's questions? Yes, sir.
The record doesn't cover Providence.
Oh, that is a good question. It covers more than Providence. Because the trains went to other places, you can find quite a few people from Eastern Connecticut. You find people from north of Rhode Island, in Eastern Mass. You find people heading over toward New Bedford and Fall River. You find people from, I see a lot of people from East Greenwich, for example. Not too many from South County that I've noticed, but Kent County is well represented. The bulk of people, obviously, is Providence. And so when you go there, when you look at our records, you'll see, if you see the street address and that's it, that's Providence. But if you see a street address and the town after it, then you know it's different. In many cases, if it's outside the town, it just says East Greenwich, North Kingston, Potawatomi, Patuxent, a lot of people from Patuxent. But it's a good question. So sometimes there are even people who moved out to Ohio and stuff. If your family, if they had a relative who stayed behind, that's what they would do. So they would open up an account, the guy moves to Ohio, and then when he opens a bank, he can transfer his money over. A lot of Irish people went back to Ireland. It's hard to imagine that, but they took the boats back. And it's very, very frequently you find, say, two sisters opening an account together, and after one of them it says going to Ireland. Yeah. Other questions? That's good. Yeah.
I just want to say, for those of you who get a chance sometime in a few months when Ray's book comes out, if you're interested in the Shanty Irish, which is where most of us came from, take the bus downtown, go up to Atwells Avenue, get off there and look around. If on the other hand you want to hear about the lace curtain Irish, get in your Lexus and drive to Newport. Because it's a whole different group of people. The other thing, Ray's book is more than just a history. It's an art book. He's got paintings, photographs, just a brilliant piece of, it's a mosaic, almost like some of those churches. So let's hope that comes out quick. Ray, a quick question.
Yeah.
Joseph Bianigan married a woman, Alice, and around 1860, Alice Hope. And she was, because of her father, a rare bird in Rhode Island, an English Catholic. So he marries an English woman, but she's Catholic, and he's Catholic too. And the family, the Hope family, came from Manchester Place in Providence. And I'm wondering, there must have been a little colony of English Catholics there, but I never got a chance to follow that up, because I don't know if you ever saw English Catholics showing up.
I do find English Catholics, not a lot of them. It reminds me of walking in St. Patrick's Cemetery over on Douglas Avenue, and it's almost entirely Irish, but I did come across an English guy one time, and it could have been something like that. He probably married into an Irish family. Incidentally, if you've not walked St. Patrick's Cemetery, it is extraordinary. It tells the story of the famine refugees, because if they could afford to have a stone, they would put on the stone where they were born. And sometimes they'd even have a little story about the sadness of having to die not in their home. There are a lot of English that show up, and they show up in the bank records. We were doing, I had at one point about 20 people that were doing transcriptions, and then once the Genealogical Society came out, there was almost no purpose to keep transcribing everything. But one of the transcribing guys loved it so much he wanted to keep going, so we decided we'd just do Irish immigrants. We won't do Irish Americans, just Irish immigrants. And so that's what we're working on right now. But we do come along the way, we've come across, there was a big movement in the 1870s of English people coming here. What's interesting is a lot of those English people were really the children of Irish immigrants. I have some of that in my family. When they left, it was easier to go to Scotland or England and get work than to go across the water. And so you see the second generation. I even find in records, I found this a couple of times recently, a woman is born in Leitrim. Her son is born in Manchester, England, and they're opening an account together. Well, what do you find out? You look at when she was born, you discover she was born before the famine. Then you look and you say, hey, he was born in 1840. So they left before the famine, but then in the 1870s, they moved together to Providence. So, you usually can't tell, unless there's a family story, you don't know if your family lived in Scotland for a while or England for a while. Now, my cousin Martha and I, we know because we have a family connection where they left counties Antrim and Derry up in the north of Ulster, and they went to work in Scotland and then down in England. And then eventually they find their way to Providence, Rhode Island, or actually to Harrisville. But that kind of connection is really hard to find, but it shows up quite a few times in the records. Yeah.
How far do the records at Old Stone Bank go? The reason I'm asking is my family came from England, Irish Catholics.
Yep.
Came from England in 1910. So I'm wondering if that's too late to really.
We don't have the what they call the signature records. That's where the official record, the legal record where you opened up the account. And we only go up to 1897 with that.
Oh, okay.
If whatever those records after that, who knows? However, they do have the records of the accounts. They're really hard to go through, but you can go and look at pages and pages of deposits and withdrawals. It's so much material. It's never. I don't think it's ever going to get transcribed. Never going to get scanned because it's so much material. I haven't done it with my own. I've done a little bit with my own family, but but you can go and you can find them that way. But you won't get I don't think you'll get the same material. You'll get the name, but you won't get all the other stuff because that was a signature thing because they didn't have photo IDs. So how do we recognize you when you come back?
Yeah.
What was your mother's maiden name? What was your, blah, 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 blah. Yes.
And like in this picture, you mentioned that a lot of the Irish came from Ulster.
Yes.
Do you know if they were Catholic or Protestant?
Mostly Catholic. Mostly Catholic. As we know, Ulster was mostly occupied and replanted, if you will, with English and Scots. Some of those English and Scots came over to Providence, but it was almost all Irish Catholics. That's why sometimes when I tell people that I'm Irish and my family's from Ulster, and they look at me like, I've got 2 lines of that too, of Scots-Irish, Scots that 2 generations later. Yes. Yeah.
I was wondering if there are any other examples in New England of banks similar to Old Stone, allowing people working class to open accounts in, other parts. So like a lot of my family is from the Fall River area. I got a lot of information from New England, a lot of people in the Historical Society, especially with the marriage records, because they were really
Yeah.
accurate with giving mother's maiden name on a marriage record in Massachusetts. So that was very helpful.
They-
But I'm curious if they're outside of the Rhode Island area, if there are other examples of something similar.
The Genealogical Society has gotten permission from various dioceses in Massachusetts to transcribe or to scan and transcribe church records, and they're fabulous. I've made inquiries of the Providence Diocese, and I don't think that they want to expose that. I have been told from time to time, if we did that, then people would find out that some of these people were illegitimate. So let's see, 170 years later, there's gonna be a scandal in that family. And the thing is that
We got a new bishop coming up.
even when, so if you guys have any connections with the diocese, it could be done. You know what I did though, you won't tell anybody. I got permission from Father Bob Heyman to take photographs with my camera, with my phone, of baptisms and marriage records. And I've got a ton of them, but they're so hard to translate because they wrote in Latin and they had crummy handwriting. And a lot of the early priests weren't very well educated anyway, so they weren't taught to write. Like my dad and my mom, probably your grandparents or parents, had the same thing where they were taught, nuns taught them how to write so beautifully. Well, these priests are like scratching it out. However, with technology changes, I now, if I Google, say I Google McKenna, my photographs, a bunch of records are going to show up from St. Peter and Paul's, and McKenna's identified in these photographs that I took. So I could almost on my own, but I can't because I don't have permission. I could do a whole thing of those records. I just hope the church will allow it at some point, because it doesn't hurt anybody to know. Anyway, good question though. Check the Old Stone Bank, because there were people. And as far as Boston goes with banks, your first question, the Old Stone Bank was based on a bank that opened 3 years earlier in Boston. And it was called the Providential Savings Bank. And they called theirs Providence Savings Bank. So it was the first bank in the United States that allowed the working class to come in, open up an account, and put nickels in or put pennies in. I remember when I was a kid, some of you do too, because you're all younger than me, that I could at school, I could put a nickel or a quarter into a bank account. Well, they allowed that for the first time at this bank in Boston.
Tuesday was bank day.
I don't know if Tuesday was bank day. I don't know if those records exist. We're just lucky that somebody at the bank said, "Do you want all?" I mean, I've seen this stuff. I mean, you'd almost say like, "It's too much. I don't want it." We're lucky that they offered it up. We're lucky that Rhode Island Historical Society took it. Now, there is one other bank that I know of that has records like this. This is the Immigrant Savings Bank in New York. And I found very detailed information on one of the people you saw on the earlier who did live in New York and opened up an account and wrote down when he arrived, the name of the ship he arrived on, and where this town he was born in Scotland. So that exists, but otherwise, no. This thing that we have in Rhode Island is other than the Immigrant Savings Bank, is unique. And I think we have more records than the Immigrant Savings Bank that still exist. Yes. But here, you can come a little closer.
What if we train people with chants, they would never have an account.
If they didn't have an account, you got to go to census records, to city directories, Dexter Asylum. I think I've never. Have you ever worked with Dexter Asylum records? I think they exist. I think Rhode Island Historical Society might have them. I've been tempted to do that because that was half the people who lived in the Dexter Asylum were Irish. I found a lot of records in City Hall, but it's a matter of just literally picking up pieces of paper and then finding something on it. I spent a lot of time up on the top floor of the City Hall doing that. And the fact that stuff shows up in the Old Bank is just a miracle. I did a talk to a genealogical group recently, Rhode Island Genealogical Society, and one of the women that runs the thing said, I've been working on my family for decades, and it wasn't until I opened up the Old Stone Bank that I found out my English ancestor came from this specific place. Yeah, it's pretty wild. Other questions? Yeah.
When did the Old Stone Bank close?
That, I had left Rhode Island by that time. I'd been living in exile since 1972. Graduated, tried to get a job and couldn't find a job. And my wife is from Stamford, Connecticut, and I went down there and one day I had a job. Yeah, and we tried for several months. It was really depressing. We could not get work in Rhode Island. But I've never come back. So I've always lived in exile. So I remember because my dad talked about how he had stock in the bank and he should have gotten rid of it.
I think it was the early 80s.
Early 80s?
Yeah, and then Citizens Bank bought up all the, a lot of the old stone banks.
Ah, okay.
So there could have been a buyout.
If you ask me questions about the 19th century, I can tell you.
Yeah.
The 20th century, I'm lost.
I know, but do you ever do tours of the cemetery? Like, I know Providence had cemetery month or something, and they did tours of the one on North Main Street.
North Burial Ground.
North
North
Burial
Burial
Ground.
Ground, yeah.
And I know sometimes the one on the east side, Swan Point, does their own little tours.
Yeah.
They do it for botanical reasons, not so much about food. Well, sometimes who's buried there.
So the question is, do I do cemetery tours?
St. Patrick's one.
Halloween.
St. Patrick's, that's the one. I don't know. This guy, Kevin Doyle guy, sitting back there. He told me when I arrived, because he wrote me into doing this Roscommon Souls thing. I was driving home from the Big Y. Big Y is a supermarket out where I live. I was driving back home from the Big Y. This is a long way to tell you the answer. And I get a call from Kevin Doyle. Hey, Kevin, how are you? Hey, good, right. Hey, you want blah, 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 blah. All of a sudden, like a half an hour later, I'm far from my house. I'm driving around. This guy is asking me if I want to come and tell the Federal Hill Irish story. Anyway, and when I arrived today, this is by way of answering if I give cemetery tours. When I arrived today, he gives me this thing about this ship, this whaling ship that went out, and how Roscommon Souls is with me is going to tell the story.
Look at Talbot.
He just signs me up. So it would take somebody like McGarrick over here or somebody else to wrote me into it, but I would be very happy to give a tour of St. Patrick's Cemetery. It's one of my favorite addresses in the city. I love it. Oh, and you know what they have? Well, you know, parts of me are there. My ancestors. They also have a fairy tree. At least one fairy tree. Yeah. Planted by famine survivors. So the fairies could watch over the people in the cemetery. So I would love to give it, I would be very happy to give a tour of the cemetery. Yes.
Then I have another question. When you were showing the old farmhouse, you said it was abandoned. So now, people who have whose ancestors own that, can they go back and claim that land?
The question is, if you discover a house, an abandoned house like that your ancestor lived in, well, first off, your ancestor, let's say it's your ancestor. Your ancestor did not own it because they didn't allow Catholics, assuming your ancestor was Catholic, they did not allow Catholics to own property. But so if you leased it, there was a movement in the 1880s where they started to break up the big farms and allow people who farmed it to buy them. But you're out of luck. But otherwise, I mean, you go back and tell. They like good stories, so you go there and you just tell them some good stories, and you'll get a pint out of it anyway. That's what I got out of talking here tonight. I got a pint. It was a good pint. It was a good pint. Yes. Question. Yes. You.
Someone behind me?
No.
No, it's you.
Yeah, it's you.
I've been working on 400 or 500 families in the Wesley Pawcatuck area, and a fair number of them have the immigrant ancestor who arrived in Providence or settled in Providence for maybe 4 or 5, sometimes 10 years, and then moved on to Wesley and Pawcatuck. What are the odds that someone who was there for that short a time would appear in the old stone records?
Oh, did everybody hear his question? Yeah. That's a very good question, and the answer is one you're gonna like. It's very
Not
likely.
likely.
Very likely.
Oh, it is.
I told a story about Edward Fanning, who wouldn't put down his naturalization thing where he came from, even though his 14 friends did. I found him. I didn't know he lived in Rhode Island. He spent probably a few months in Mohegan, in Burrillville. However long he was there, and I don't think it was more than a year, but he opened an account. So yeah. We'll have to write back and forth because I'm very curious about the connection. I didn't want to take on the whole state, even though it's not the biggest state. But I didn't want to take on the whole state because Newport is a whole different kettle of fish as far as the Irish go, as Scotty was saying. We're better, actually. Scotty implied that, but anyway, and so and Westerly is like really, really far away. Now, I'll tell you how far away Westerly is. I lived in East Greenwich, okay? I was a teenager. And my cousin, Mike Lenahan, this is Martha's brother. He was a state senator, you may know that, but he was a really good football player. And I think it was a state championship. They went down to Westerly to play. And I got on a bus and went down. I think I might have been in junior high, I don't know. Martha, you may know the date later on, but you can tell me. But anyway, I went down on a bus and I was like, where the heck am I going? This is out of state. This is like so far away. You know, to give you another example, this guy, Scott Malloy. Scott Malloy he used to live in Kingston. I'd say, Scotty, let's get together. Said, oh yeah. Well, I'm gonna drive an hour and a half. Why don't you drive 20 minutes or 25 minutes up to Providence and we meet in Providence? Oh, I don't know. I don't know if I can do that. That's really far. Let me think about it. I'll get back to you another week. And then the guy moves to North Kingston. Closer, man. It's like 19 minutes. Ain't no way. So I have to get out and see him in Kingston, North Kingston. And we can go to have a bite to eat. But it's only like 2 miles from his house. It's a Rhode Island thing, isn't it? 52 years in exile and I still have it. I live on the east side of the Connecticut River. The west side, that's a whole other group of people. Other questions? Thank you so much.
Let's hope Next year, we have a book signing here with Ray. Have a good night. Just one last thing. In the back of the room, we have a raffle. You can go up there, buy ticket stubs, you put them in a bag, and later on in an hour or so downstairs, the winners will be picked. You don't have to be here. It helps if you're here. If you're going to leave, make sure you give contact information on the back of the ticket. The money from the fundraiser, from the raffle, pays for the music that you're going to hear downstairs. So Ray's going to go down, have another pint. Everyone can, bend his ear or try to get some more information. But it's good fun downstairs. They're still serving food. Thank you for coming. We hope we see you next month at Tim Hoyt's lecture. And let's keep this place going. If you're not a member, please try to join up tonight. Thank you very much. Oh, yeah, if anyone wants the